Good afternoon, and welcome to the Purple Couch at the University of Northern Iowa. I'm Mark Nook, the president here at the university, and I'll be serving as today's moderator. It's great to have you joining us online, and hope you enjoyed this segment. The Purple Couch is an opportunity for us at the university to really explore courageous conversations, very serious conversations about equity, diversity, and inclusion here at the university and throughout the Cedar Valley. Today we're joined by two guests that serve on the President's Advisory Committee for Inclusion, Social Justice, and Advocacy. I'll ask each of you to introduce yourself, and as you introduce yourself, I'd also ask you to answer the question, what's your vision in regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion here at the University of Northern Iowa? Start with Jamie.
Oh, great. Awesome. Well, my name is Jamie Butler-Chidozie, and I serve as the Director for Diversity, Inclusion, and Social Justice here at UNI, and I serve as Chair for the President's Council for Inclusion, Transformative, Social Justice, and Advocacy. I would say to answer that question, Dr. Nook, is very much those terms, one, for me, bring up different things. So when you're talking about diversity, we're talking about just the presence of difference, and that we're honoring that difference as an institution, as an organization, and then in honoring that it filters throughout our community, even throughout the Cedar Valley. When we're talking about inclusion, is involving and engaging across those differences in conversations similar to what we've been having with the Purple Couch series and what we're doing definitely today. But it's also doing an interrogation throughout that process to even acknowledge who or what are the voices that might be missing from those conversations. And then when I think about equity, it's definitely not that we're just impacting our community in regards to those differences and into that inclusion process, but that we're making sure that we have equitable resources, equitable access and opportunities for people to really thrive, for individuals to thrive within our organizations, whether that's students, faculty, staff, visitors, guests, friends, that they're thriving while they're here.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Doug?
I'm Douglas Mupasiri. I am the head of the Department of Mathematics and also a member of the President's Council for Inclusion, Transformative, Social Justice, and Advocacy. And my vision for the work that we are doing here now is to perhaps make a small dent in the elusive quest for creating a place where everybody feels welcome. I am interested in furthering what has, at least for all of my life, been a very difficult sort of issue to resolve. Which is the issue of, I think it was Rodney King who put it well, can we all just get along? And more than that, getting along in ways that mean more to or enhance all of our lives, not just to get along. So I am invested in this work. I have been doing it for a long time. I see here an opportunity to really make a difference. There is a confluence of things that have happened this summer, in the last several years, which have sort of brought to light issues that everybody can sort of relate to. And so my hope is that this initiative that the president has started here will lead to meaningful change.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. And today we are talking about the President's Advisory Committee on Inclusion, Social Justice, and Transformative Social Justice and Advocacy. And Jamie and Doug are both serving on that committee, and I want to thank both of you for the work you're doing and for taking on this role. It is a heavy lift, and as you both, as Doug mentioned, as you both recognize, It is an elusive quest. It's one our country has been on for a long time, and our university for more than 50 years, and really longer than that, but we kind of trace it back to that time in particular. And hopefully we are on to something a little bit different. We know we'll be taking the next step. With that, we have put this committee together earlier this summer, really at the end of the spring. We announced who was going to be on it. Following Following the incidents of this summer, we started the committee a little bit earlier than we had planned. We originally announced this committee as the President's Advisory Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The committee got together. Part of the charge was to figure out what the charge really was. The draft charge changed that. But the committee when they first met, asked if they could change the name. And I think that was a big step. I think it's an important step. And would you talk a little bit about why the committee wanted to change the name and what it really means for our campus to think in these terms instead of just diversity, equity, and inclusion?
You want me to take that off? Yeah, absolutely. And so, Dr. Nook, as you were sharing, with the formation of the committee as it stands here at UNI, it was a very different process in how to build this particular committee out versus perhaps what has happened previously. And I know we may get to some of that with Doug's experience here on the institution, talking about it from a historical standpoint, but really kind of wanting to take ownership of the work and look at things quite differently, but to speak out very intentionally what our goals were. And so in our first initial meetings, the conversations really centered around what does systematic change look like at UNI? And it goes beyond equity, it goes beyond diversity, it goes beyond inclusion, because at the bottom line, like Doug was saying, is that at the baseline, what we gathered is that we as an institution need change. That we need change, that we recognize that there's an issue here on our campus in regards to equity, in regards to social justice. And so this is a process by which we need to change. We need to transform. And so that's kind of where the name came from, just in regards to transformative social justice. We want to definitely advocate for individuals who have been minoritized on our campus. So I'll leave it. I'll stop there. I could go on, but I'll stop there. And
well, so I must confess that as one of the old people on that committee, it wasn't something that I had thought needed to change. Actually, I was slow to warm up to the idea, but I can blame that on old age. We have people on this committee that have sort of academic backgrounds in the work of transformative social justice, and they thought that framing our work, giving our work that frame, might actually be useful. And I think, as Jamie pointed out, there was also some interest in breaking with the past, right? We have had advisory councils in the past which had a name that was very similar to the name that you had proposed. And the young people on that committee wanted a complete break from that, and to sort of say, this is a new initiative, we are charting a new course, and so let our name reflect that.
right.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And you both mentioned that this is a little different composition too. We've got some much younger people on this committee. They've come through a different educational process. We've got a little bit larger number of students.
Yes.
And I'd say this group of students is extremely committed to this work as well, which is very, very important. Talk a little about the composition of this committee, and if you can, how they came together, how that selection process really did differ from what we've done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I can start. I'll start. It kind of seems to be like this is going to be the order here, and that's fine. I think one of the things in building and being intentional about really progressing equity and social justice here at the institution is that the approach that was taken was really to go through the shared governance processes to make sure that all of our constituents were represented from our community on the advisory committee. At the same time, I think it's important to recognize that this is a very diverse group of individuals with varying backgrounds. So we have faculty members. You have mentioned we have students, we have administrators, we have staff, we have merit staff. We also have a community member that's also represented on the committee, and definitely Henry Bevel, and he brings such a different perspective as someone kind of on the outside. And I'm gonna put that in air quotes because of course we don't want to situate people as outsiders, but just as someone who is not connected in the same way to the institution, who really can provide that. A lot of times he does provide that non-biased voice to say, or he'll he'll stop and say like, wait, y'all, well, let's back up and let's reframe this because I don't know what you're talking about. and so it makes us really take a step back and really kind of think about that. So the process was that we went to the shared governance. The individuals nominated people throughout that process. Applications were taken. Everyone who on the committee, this is not forced work. People are there who are committed, who want to do the work, and who are very vocal and speak and really invested in making sure that UNI is a great place.
Yeah.
So yeah, in fact, speaking for myself, one of the reasons I sort of agreed to take on this task and be on this council was it really did strike me as being and as taking a different approach from what we've done in the past. So I was on the first President Advisory Council on diversity here, and I was just looking over some documents from 2009 when our charge and was approved by the president. And a major difference was that membership on that committee was actually made up of people who were named by the president. All right. Now, to his credit, those were folks who were drawn from all the different constituencies on campus, but they were nonetheless named by the president. This is very different, right? So that was one of the aspects of this council that I really liked, that it sort of, as Jamie pointed out, the president took the attitude that he was going to involve the community in forming this committee. And that seemed to me to be probably an approach that, first of all, broke with the past, but also looked to have a much greater chance of success than we had had in the past. So that, and again, as Jamie mentioned, we have students, young students, and very, very young students, and sometimes, not having had the benefit of history is helpful because you can sort of think outside the box, completely unbound by what you have seen before, and I think we need that on this committee. Henry, as the member of the community here, Cedar Valley community, a lawyer in town, he brings a perspective to how things are done outside of academia, which I think we need and we value on that community.
It's a really important point. We get in our own little box, and it's especially true in higher education. We spend so much time in academic circles and talking with our students, with our colleagues and things. And the students always come in not knowing there's a box. And Henry's box is very, very different, the community box.
Right.
And it's great to have that perspective and get us to open our vision a little bit. I also really appreciate, and it was really the suggestion of the students that we deepen this process of selection, that it isn't just turning to our shared governance leaders and saying, who put somebody on here.
Right.
But for many of these groups, they went through a real almost search process. People turned in, this is why I'd like to be on and talk about that, and they went through an interview process. So it's it's a very committed, as you were both pointing out, group, as opposed to somebody that was simply asked to be on, and really appreciate that.
Can I say
go
just
ahead.
one more thing
Absolutely.
on that too? I think it's very important to note when we're talking about perspective and the composition of the group is what's so dynamic to me about this group, even versus, although I have not been here as long as Doug has been here, having served on this the second kind of committee, is that really bringing a holistic approach to looking at equity and inclusion. And so you have individuals with intersecting identities. And so that offers just a certain value in regards to really, when we're thinking about systematic change, it's like someone's always like, we can't forget about accessibility though. When we're having conversations about campus climate, we have to think about that. Where we're talking about the curriculum, we got to include, well, what about neurodiversity? And so for us, what we are actually finding, as we're going through our processes, and I know we will probably talk about, the work, is that it's ever expanding.
Yep.
And that is specifically due to the makeup and the composition of the group and the varied perspectives that each individual brings to the committee.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
One of the other things that the committee did right away, and this will start to get into the work of the committee, is a charge was given, but it was a draft charge. It wasn't a completed charge, which is a little bit different. And we said,
Very different.
you go to work, work on the charge, get the real charge.
Yeah.
So talk a little about where you ended up and how that process went, but now what is the work of the committee as the committee has really defined it for the university?
I think we battled with that for a couple meetings.
Yes.
Just with the idea of having a draft charge. And so that just kind of lets you know, like, even though we're coming in with these perspectives and understanding that we definitely want to see change, I think we quickly realized, like, we want to see change. We changed the name of the group, and then it's like, well, a draft charge? We should have been given a charge. And so, just in all transparency, I think for us, we had moments, like even at the beginning, where we had to say, okay, like, let's take a look at the work. Like, what is the work? Let's take a look at the charge. And so we started with the draft charge. We literally wrote down answers. As a chair, I wrote down answers to the question that I asked everyone to speak to, like, what does systematic change look like here at the institution? And what we really narrowed in on is that we need to do an organizational inventory. That's kind of the baseline of our work, an organizational assessment, inventory, to look at how we can really start to make that transformative change. And so from that, we have a working list that keeps getting longer and longer as we continue to have our conversations, but in that kind of narrowed down to kind of 4 topical areas. We didn't necessarily just throw out the draft charge in its totality, but we definitely specified some things and put in some more actionable goal setting, I guess, kind of where we kind of want to move forward in that regard. So, yeah.
So this again was one of the places where, for me, this process is quite different from what we have done in the past. So I just mentioned a moment ago that before coming to this event here, I was looking through some documents from way back when I was on the President Diversity Council. And the document that we put out in 2009 an interesting thing about that was the charge was really just, here is the charge. Right? It was a charge that was developed, and we were just given the charge. This is what we were going to do. Another huge difference was that the agenda was set so the person who presided over our meetings at the time had to be, in fact, it was written in the charge that it was going to be somebody at the VP level. It started out as the VP for Student Affairs. And that was the person, he set the agenda for every meeting, and this is very different, right? So it was interesting that we, at least you allowed us the space and the latitude to determine within the parameters that you sort of had indicated in your draft charge. We could really, you gave us the space to sort of carve out what we felt we could do and how we were going to do it. And, so at base, you had asked us really as a place which would provide recommendations for goals and action steps. And so that stays in there. That was one of the things that you had, in fact, had put in the draft charge, ensuring that the university analyzes its work on diversity and inclusion and transformative justice. That was another thing that we settled on. Evaluating progress towards meeting those goals. Identifying barriers and challenges to the work that we were going to need to do, and continuously updating the university's sort of statement on diversity and and so and lastly developing and revising a sort of definitions. So that everybody we would be communicating with would know what it was that we were doing. So that's where we settled. So I mean, this is really sort of, partly our own work, but it was really sort of anchored in the draft that you had given us. So yeah.
And I would say, like, in the process of, of trying to finalize the charge, it was really kind of going back and forth. So from the committee to making recommendations to the office of the president, it really was a collaboration and going back and forth. And there were some things, like at one point I told Dr. Nook, the committee's just not gonna budge. They're not gonna budge on this. And so what do you wanna do? This was like, okay. It's like, it's like, okay. And then it's also important to point out, because in particular, I think it's important that we do have young minds. We have students who are on the committee. Like it would be an error to not give credit to the work that students did prior to the advisory committee coming together, and all the documents and the research that they did. Because we as a committee looked at that. We looked at that document that students had presented, and we took from that. We took from that and embedded much of those pieces even into the charge. And what we couldn't embed in the charge, even in our thought process, is having conversations about decision making, the decisions how we're going to move forward. It was the reason why we came up, our first recommendation was, hey, we need to look at our institution. We need to do an inventory. Let's ask some of the tough questions.
That's right.
How can we get the data to ask some of the tough questions? So right now, along with what Doug outlined, we have, again, a working list, but we're honing in on 4. And you're going to have to help me remember, Doug, because I always get 3 and then I always leave out 1. We're looking at the budget, for example. So we're asking questions like, we hear anecdotally, our institution doesn't spend any money in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We don't spend a dime. And then there's other people who say, well, I have money for this, I have money for that, I spend money for this. What's the truth? And so I guess for us, we're fact finders. We're trying to get at the truth of where our institution actually is. So we're asking, well, how much is our our institution, how much of our departments, our units spending on budget? Where are areas of growth? Where are we excelling in regards to the services that we're offering to offer up as models for our institution? So the budget is one piece. The second piece is a curriculum. So we have, we're working hand in hand with Faculty Senate to look at how do we diversify our curriculum? What are some things that we can incentivize in regards to like faculty, staff kind of, particularly faculty owning some of this work? We have members who are working on looking at campus climate. And then the fourth one is yes. The fourth one, the fourth kind of small group is faculty and staff. And so thinking about our hiring processes, our pay equity, affinity groups, anything along the lines of what is the experience like? Because that's what we really as a advisory committee want to get to, is that we want to address both campus climate and the campus culture, which are two different things. And so the final charge, we hope reflects that.
Yeah, great.
That's really, I mean, that's been interesting because one of the things that we hope we can bring to light is the level of activity that is happening on campus that's unheralded, that people just don't know about, right? There are pockets on this campus that have been working on this stuff, but they are sort of in their own corner, right? And one of the things that we hope to highlight is what those pockets are, and maybe sort of identify opportunities for all these pockets to collaborate. In the hope that the sum of the parts is greater than what you get from the individual pieces. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to do. Yeah. With respect to some of these subgroups that we have formed, we have 4 different subgroups that are working on all of these items that we identified. And we're finding out some things that are really very, very exciting. I mean, we made, for example, last week with one unit, which gave us information about how they are doing their work, including numbers on their budgets, which just, I mean, to me, I mean, I've been here a long time, I was totally surprised that they were doing as much as they are actually doing, because this is information that they generally don't talk about. But I think it's information that should be shared with the wider public so people actually recognize that the place is not as dormant as it might look. There are also other places which, frankly, need to amp up.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
Their work, so yeah.
And that's part of it. Part of the work is we definitely want to highlight where we are, but we also need to be honest and authentic. And I always say it's like, it's like medicine. I have to be able to tell you, I need to know what the symptoms are so that I know what to prescribe for you. Like, everybody recognizes there's some areas in which we're sick. We need help. We need some medicine. And so the work of the advisory committee, from my perspective, is that, we serve as the solution to a problem that we can point out to where, and people won't get offended. And they'll say, yeah, I can see. And what we're finding is that people are being more forthcoming, or they're saying, oh, shoot. Let's get some stuff going, because we know the advisory committee is coming, which works to our benefit as well, as an institution. And so yeah.
I think what we're seeing, what you're starting to see, what you're describing, what I've heard, is the committee is becoming something of a purple couch, in that this is about having these open, difficult, honest conversations, and the committee is able to do that as they go in and ask questions of people and raise questions. The other point that you've raised, and it's so true on throughout the Midwest, and our campus is no different. We suffer from militant modesty. We don't talk about the things we're doing and really champion those and get them out. We you know, you put your head down, you get your work done, and you come back tomorrow and do the same thing. And there is a lot that's going on that simply isn't known. And one of the things that can lead to, you mentioned a little bit too, is isolation, right? That good things are happening over here and good things are happening over here, but they're not connected, and you can't get as much out of it if they don't know the other is going on, and the university certainly can't orchestrate in the same way. So I think it's going to be very helpful to see how those things come up and some of the synergies that are engaged. And you have to be seeing some synergies within your committee, just the way people are working together and opening some of those up. What are some of the challenges you really faced as you've done this work this semester?
Do we have time? I think whenever you bring, 14 people together with varying perspectives, especially around, and who are passionate. I mean, you couldn't have put together a committee with more passionate people. I would say, like, we always run out of time. And what we're finding as we're delving into the work and as we're having conversation, it feels like another layer is added to the work. And so for us, I know at a meeting not long ago, I wanted to do a check-in. I said, how's everyone feeling? And it's like, because it's so much, and it's so much to the point it almost feels like, are we doing enough? Because it is so much. And so it's really kind of understanding that, one of the things that I appreciate about this committee is that it's a standing committee. This shouldn't be like a fly-by-night committee. Like, the work needs to happen on a continuous basis. We've also taken the approach, I don't know how we got to that place. We don't do majority rules. Like, we don't do a vote. We don't vote. We don't, it's just, if we put out something, it's because everybody has agreed, whether they are slower to come around to it or not. It's just like, okay, well, Doug's not on board yet. Let's put this on the meeting for, let's put, I don't know, we might be wearing Doug down. Let's put it on the agenda for next week. And so it's not a majority rules. And so when that's going to take some time. And so, but we want to make sure that there's not as many holes. I would say another challenge, and then I'll let Doug speak. Another challenge is that because it's different, it's a different approach. It feels different to the community as well. So of course, when we're going and asking people, what's your budget? Or what's the demographics of your office look like, racially? How are you supporting LGBTQIA faculty and staff or students within your area? That automatically feels like a judgment. And so we're having to try to, and even now still, trying to message that, no, that's not what this process is. And so it's after having conversations with people, it's like, oh, okay. So yeah.
So I couldn't agree with you more. Yes, we have had some challenges on our committee, as Jamie pointed out. The members are really, really, really passionate about what they do. They have strong views about things, which is great, different views. And that way we get to hear very different perspectives on this work. It also is great to me because if we are going to have courageous conversations with people outside of the committee, we better be prepared within the committee to have courageous conversations too. And that is actually taking place. And that's good because then we really are sort of living what we say we are or what we say we're after, right? And so that's great. The other thing is I'm hoping that we get to a place where we don't view each other as sort of, gee, I mean, this person is going to get me. This is, I have no interest in that because as long as we have that attitude, and I believe I speak for the committee on this. So long as we have that attitude, we won't make progress. We are all here to learn. In fact, one of the things that I've found out is I've learned over time is that every single one of us has a blind spot.
Right.
Exactly.
Most of us have more blind spots than we are willing to admit. So this is not a thing that anybody should be embarrassed about, should be ashamed of. And in fact, the mere fact that we can talk about these things in constructive ways is in itself a really, really great thing. And we can all grow and in the process make this institution a great place to be, a welcoming place, a place where everybody feels like they belong.
Yeah. And you've talked about courageous conversations and having them in the committee and feeling them starting to overflow into these conversations you're having with other people around campus. We certainly have seen that as we've talked to other people in other settings around campus and really being able to ask some tough questions. So far today we've talked about processes and some easy stuff, right? Let me ask a question that I didn't tell you I was going to ask before, but it comes up because of what you said. What do you see as the difficult things we're going to have to really wrestle with as a campus? You're started to see them inside your committee, right? I know that you're challenging each other, that you're asking questions not just about race and ethnicity and diversity in terms of ability, physical, emotional, and mental, gender and gender identity and sexual orientation. We're getting a much more diverse definition of diversity, right? And what it means to be equitable. What is the committee really starting to see is going to be the hard challenges, the things that are going to be the toughest to really crack, and what are we going to have to wrestle with sort of the soul of the university about?
Well, you know, one issue that I see that we really are going to have to sort of work very hard to overcome is what this work means or looks like to some people. All right. There are people out there who really are afraid. Afraid of what this means, what change means, what change might mean to them, what change might mean for prospects for their future, the future of their kids, the future of their grandchildren. There are people who are really genuinely scared. All right. So a question that we're going to have to grapple with is, how do we convince people that there is nothing here to be afraid of? All right. First of all, at least for me, it's the right thing to do. That's the first thing. It's the right thing to do to make everybody feel like this is a place where they belong. I don't see why anybody would object to that. That is something that we should all sort of be willing to say, that's a good thing to do. That's a good thing. Secondly, parents entrust us with their kids for 4, 5, 6 years. And it really behooves all of us to sort of say, have we provided these students with the best preparation? Are they ready when they leave this place to go out into the world and make a difference? Sure, chart their own paths, but also think in terms of the wider community. Are we doing that? Right. If the answer is no, well, then what are some things we could do that we aren't currently doing? There will be the issue of how do we infuse these matters in the curriculum in a way that everybody is comfortable with, it's not rammed down their throat. So I'm pleased that the Faculty Senate has sort of taken that on as part of one of the things that they're doing. But I think that's an area where people will sort wonder, what does this mean, right? The faculty have to be clear that we are not talking about watering down anything. We are just thinking of best ways, keeping our standards. How can we do this in ways that can actually improve the product that we put out to this world? So.
I would say, as an answer to that question is, I always pose this question, is that, what risk are we willing to take as an institution? And that's tough to grapple with. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is a resistance to change. And that with changing comes tough decisions. And so if there's a recommendation to restructure, to say we need to look at this particular part, whether it's the curriculum, whether it's student affairs, whether it's I'm trying to think of things that I'm attached to, but it's looking at, hey, we need to make an actual change. Well, then that takes people making a decision. And what if you're the decision maker? And you know that whatever you decide is going to be critiqued and criticized within your institution and outside of your institution. And for the advisory council, the way that we are set up is that we are to make recommendations to you.
That's right.
And so you are that person. And so that in and of itself, that's a challenge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Also trying to be everything to everyone. And so we've had, we've had emails saying like, has the committee thought about this? Has the committee thought about that? From faculty, from students, and from staff. And it's like, oh, yes. And so it's this urgency too that's a challenge for the committee, because we're trying to be strategic. We want to progress. We want to, and that's why we've taken the approach to make ongoing recommendations and to communicate that out to campus on a frequent basis. So that the community knows that the work is going on and will continue to go on, and to understand that this work has to continue to go on, and we may not get to your concern till next year. That's hard for somebody to hear. So that's a challenge. And another challenge to this work is organizational pride. Yep. We're here because we love UNI. We bleed purple and gold. And so, but part of it is kind of what you were talking about with the, it's kind of almost on the other, like the other side of being modest, is that we still have this pride. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with UNI, not my UNI. There's nothing wrong. And so understanding that, I always say, like, if equity, if diversity, equity, inclusion, transformative social justice, advocacy, however you want to term it, if it's not causing injury to the organization, you are not doing the work. So some of this is not going to feel, it's just not. It's not going to feel good. And who wants to not feel good?
Mm-hmm. Well, so one way I can frame this is there's something that's come up on our committee, actually, that we have to get to a place where people are comfortable being uncomfortable, right? The issues that we're going to talk about may make people uncomfortable in certain places, but also actually there is a preservation aspect to this work, right? Which you have mentioned many times, that the demographics of the students in elementary and high schools in Iowa right now are of a nature that unless we really are prepared in the ways that this initiative sort of contemplates, we risk really just going down the tube. Right. I mean, we are going to have to recruit students that look very different from the students that we are recruiting right now. They will have other options. Those students can go to other places. So do we want to make UNI relevant and continue to be relevant? Sure, we have pride. Yeah. I think a bigger pride for us is to ensure that our future actually
exists. We have
is guaranteed. We have one.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
And our individuals are thriving. Yeah. They're thriving while they're here. They're not just here, but they're thriving while they're here.
They're thriving while they're here. And as we talked about in another session, this idea of being inclusive and making sure that everybody has that equitable opportunity to be successful. And if we're really hitting that mark, then we've got equal outcomes.
Yes.
And our data shows us we don't yet. We've got a lot of work to do in that regard. A couple of thoughts from things that you brought up. This connection to the curriculum is really, really important. And it's hard because like the other things that we're gonna have to take on, there is a level of ownership, right? And within academia in particular, there is this strong feeling of academic freedom, right? My class, my course, my topics, this is how we're going to talk about things. But the curriculum as well, right? The faculty sets the tone for what is what a major is, what classes have to be taken, what are the learning outcomes in those classes, how do we meet them, what are the objectives? And then, of course, there's the liberal arts core. And I know many people are looking at that. It's up for revision, it's being reviewed, it's being revised. I think it's an appropriate time. I really have appreciated the way the Faculty Senate has responded and said, as we look at this, the changes in diversity and inclusion, transformative social justice, what's that mean for our curriculum? And that is going to be a heavy discussion, a courageous discussion to have as a faculty, and it's good to see them engaging, but it is going to be very, very difficult. It's going to take change, and some of our faculty leaders in particular, department chairs, deans, are going to have to lead that change, and you're not going to make everybody happy with change. There's going to be some people that this thing moves, especially under a limited resources.
Right.
If you're going to start doing these, something else has to go, and that does mean a pivot, and that's going to be difficult. As we look at the work right now, we're going to kind of get a recap of the work coming out here soon. We've kind of talked about where you're doing. What's going to be in that recap? Can you give us a look forward of what you're going to be telling the campus, the committee has done? We've kind of talked a lot about it, but in a nutshell, what's the work that's been accomplished to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have been meeting with each of the small groups, and I have been meeting with multiple people on campus, and we've kind of started doing some presentations around campus. So we did a presentation for University Council. We did a presentation recently with the Academic Dean's Council, and so in this summary report, we decided that it was best to kind of do more of a brief. So the expectation is that we will do an annual report. So what is going to come out here in the near future is not that. So I don't want to set people up for that, but what it will show is give summary reports of from each of the small groups, as well as some initial recommendations, kind of moving forward on each of those topical items that we kind of have already outlined and talked about today.
So we all have these small groups. Each has sort of its own folder in a shared drive thing that Jamie set up for us. And we are putting, as we are having these meetings with people, we are putting our summaries of those meetings. Each group is doing that. And so our hope is that we should be able to, almost at any moment, actually, if we wanted to, look through those things to see where each group has gotten. Budget, the committee has talked to a number of people. Some of those people have sent us documents, sort of showing what they're doing. And some didn't have any documents, but we have taken minutes of the meetings that we have had with them. So we are prepared if we choose to at any point really to say each subgroup, let's review the summaries. And of course, one of the things that we hope to do before we put any of this stuff out to the public is for the committee itself to sort of have some discussions about those summaries before they go out, so that whatever goes out is something that the entire committee sort of agrees that it should go on.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about early on in this discussion is this definition of terms, right?
Yeah.
And it's vital, right?
Right.
I've been in many conversations where it's really difficult. I start to talk to people, and it's clear their definition of diversity and inclusion isn't any different, right? It's the same word. They turn them around and use them the same way all the time. So let's talk a little about those definitions. Where are they going? Are they getting solidified? How hard has that work been? You'd think that's easy, right? We can look these up in a dictionary,
no,
but
it's not. Like I had mentioned before, like there's not enough time, and so but it remains on our agenda. And so what you will see for this semester again are the summary reports for the small group on these 4, which will be continued work throughout the semester. Next semester we're going to be tackling some of the larger big rock type items that were in the charge. So like the vocabulary, like an institutional mission statement, and even there's been calls for a vision statement as well, from the committee. And so that will be something to look forward to as we move deeper into the process, because we are understanding as we're talking to people, and some of it is intentional, is that we're not defining some terms as we're gathering some of this information. And so it's been very interesting to kind of see what people are submitting, in regards to their diversity work. And so that will help, but for us, it provides an opportunity for us to gather as much information as we can, but it also it serves as a guide to for some of those definitions. So we're getting there.
Yeah,
we're getting there.
So that's actually that's a challenge. As she said, we have sort of strategically not defined these terms as we have been requesting information, in part to sort of figure out where people are, what their own understandings of these things are. But we can't, in all conscience, write any meaningful reports if we aren't agreed ourselves on what these terms mean. So that's something that, the rubber meets the road, right? We're going to have to do that work relatively quickly, because otherwise, how do we report this work out without having a common language and a common understanding of what these terms mean?
Clearly settling on the new name had to be a conversation of what do these words mean, right? What does DEI mean? But now what do inclusion, social justice? That had to be fun.
Oh, amazing.
As academics, it is fun to dig into what do we really mean. I think one of the important things about this is that the meanings of these terms do shift with time.
They do.
Absolutely.
And right now they're shifting pretty quickly. Right? Saying diversity, that has changed certainly over my time working in higher education quite a little bit. And we never used to talk about inclusion, right? It was diversity, and it was all about getting the numbers up. And now, we're even moving from inclusion to transformative social justice and equity. And we're not talking about equality, we talk about equity.
Right, absolutely.
And so it is going to be, I really appreciate that you haven't written down the definitions yet, because the campus is still defining them.
Absolutely.
In many ways. Talk a little, though, about social justice, because it isn't a term, especially transformative social justice. It isn't a term that we've used much on this campus. We've used diversity, we've used equity, we've used inclusion. Talk a little about social justice.
You want me to start? You sure?
I remember I was slow to warm up.
So in our conversations,
confessing.
But Doug came on board. You did come on board, right, Doug? Okay, we can't have people thinking like we're divided. We came on board. So in our conversations around, social justice, it was really centered around the conversations about equity, and then making sure that it goes. A lot of what we talked about is how do we move beyond the discussions? How do we move beyond the courageous conversations? How do we change which is difficult when you think about it. How do you change both an organization's climate as well as the culture, which are two separate things? And I know that'll probably be a vocabulary word, you know, as we begin to have conversations around that. And so what social justice is really getting to rectifying, I don't want to say wrongs, but rectifying issues, gaps within the organization. And so social justice speaks to something's not right here. Something's not just here with this particular situation, and we need to mitigate it. In order to do that, there has to be some sort of change. We can't continue to do things like we did in 2009. If it didn't work in 2009, it didn't work in 2011, it didn't work in 2015, what makes us think as an organization it's going to work now in 2020? It's not. And so, social justice in and of itself, I recognize, is a scary term, especially in the realm of higher education and even society. A lot of times when people think about social justice, it's protests, it's the sit-ins, it's the die-ins, it's over at the president's house, it's doing some of those things, and it is, but it's actually speaking to what do we as an institution value, and how do we right our historical errors in regards to how people feel and live within our organization. We got to change that.
The way I look at, especially the conversation, the thoughts you've just shared, is if we're really going to be committed to doing something about the institutionalized diversity challenges that we have to be committed to really a social justice outlook.
Yeah, so as Jamie pointed out, I was slow to warm up to it, but I did warm up to it. And in fact, I think it actually is an interesting frame for the work, because I mean, I think the difficulty we're going to have is sort of explaining to people so that the term isn't tagged with interpretations that we don't intend it to have.
Right.
That's something that's always important, right? You know, we can't let people define what it is that we mean by this.
Right.
We are not in any way promoting sort of lawlessness, or that's not what we are about, right? So what at least the way I view this work of transformative social justice is, again, so we know the system isn't working the way it's supposed to work. Part of that is the policies that are within the system. If you are going to make a real meaningful change, you are going to have to transform some things. That's where the transformative aspect of this comes from. This does not mean that you know, we're going to be agitating for, hey, you know, you wronged my grandfather, and this is that. That's not what we mean. What can we do today to make life today at UNI an equitable life for everybody? How do we make the environment a good environment for everybody? How can we make systemic change, transform our structures in order to promote that sort of enviroment? That's what we, at least in my old fogey sort of way, that's the way I view it.
And we have to be able to look at what does the system look like here. We have to be able to define that too. What are the systematic issues that hinder equity on campus? That's a hard look.
It's a hard question.
Because that's ugly every time.
Every time.
Every time. There's no beauty in looking at that.
Yep. But those have to be addressed.
Right.
Jamie and Doug, I want to thank you for joining this afternoon in this conversation. It was a very pleasant conversation, yet we touched on some very challenging issues we've done. I also want to thank you and all the members of the committee for the work that you're doing. It is challenging work. It's hard to look at these things. It's hard to ask those questions. It's hard to commit the amount of time, especially under the constraints that we've got this year with the COVID pandemic, and so many other things going on. But to the entire committee, thank you for your time, your service, your dedication to the University of Northern Iowa. As you both mentioned, this work really is about laying a foundation for the future. If we don't change and we remain the same institution, we won't serve the population that's coming at us. We must make these changes. We must be committed to making those changes. So it really is extremely important work for us to be dedicating to our lives, to ourselves, to. And thank you for engaging in not just the conversation today, but the conversation ongoing. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you for inviting us and for creating the space for this work to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.